The pen tool is the most common way to draw straight lines and curves or shapes combining the two within Illustrator, particularly for those who work only with a mouse rather than a tablet. The tool operates using the Bezier curve principle, where a path is divided by anchor points, with the anchor points between curved lines having a pair of handles you can drag and adjust to control the shape of the curve. The pen tool is one of the hardest tools to master for those just starting out with Illustrator, as the Bezier method of drawing paths can be very alien. However, persevere, as once you get the hang of it, it provides a quick and efficient way to draw perfectly formed curves and silhouettes. So let's get started. We'll start very simply and learn how to draw straight lines, learn what an anchor point is and the difference between open and closed paths. I'm going to go ahead and select the pen tool from the Tools panel. You can also use the keyboard shortcut of P to select the pen tool. When the pen tool is selected, you will notice that your mouse pointer turns into a pen nib with a little asterisk next to it. To draw a straight line, I'm going to click once anywhere on my artboard. This places my first anchor point, which is indicated by the little blue square. Now, if I move my mouse around, you will see a blue guideline appear showing me where the line will be if I were to plot a new anchor point. So I'll click again and plot my second anchor point. You can now see that I've drawn my first line segment. The second anchor point now has the guide coming out of it as I move around my mouse. I can keep repeating this to draw as many line segments as I want. The green guidelines that appear as I am moving my mouse show me where I am in line with an existing anchor point or passing through the centre of an object. To stop drawing and end the line, I need to hold down the Control key or Command for Mac users before clicking anywhere on the artboard or canvas. We have now drawn what we call an open path. An open path is one that has two endpoints that are not joined. I am now going to repeat this whole process again and draw what we call a closed path, one that is a continuous line with no endpoints. With the pen tool selected, I'm going to click a few times to draw some line segments. Then for my last segment, I'm going to hover my mouse over my first anchor point. As I do so, you will see I get a little circle appear next to my pen nib. This indicates that if I click, I will be placing my last anchor point over the first and joining the path, making a closed path shape. I'm going to go ahead and click to close the path. Now you will notice when I close a path, that is it, the shape is complete. I do not have to click Control or Command to end the line. I can also easily change an open path into a closed path. I'm going to go back to my original open path with the pen tool still selected. I'm going to hover my mouse over one of the endpoints. You can see that the asterisk next to the mouse icon changes into a /. This indicates that if I now click, I will be joining onto the existing anchor point and continuing the path. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Before I close this path, I'm going to show you how to constrain lines vertically, horizontally and at a 45-degree angle. So before I plot my next anchor point, I'm going to hold down the Shift key. You can see that when I move my mouse, the guidelines are now constrained. I'm going to create a few constrained path segments before closing my shape as before. Now we've been through how to draw open and closed paths made up from straight lines. Now let's look at how to draw curves. I'm just going to clear the artboard to give us some space. So first up, I'm going to click on the artboard to create my first anchor point. As I draw my second anchor point, instead of just clicking, I'm going to click but also drag my mouse. You can see my guideline is now curved and my second anchor point has two handles coming off it. The longer the length of the handle, the deeper the curve. When I am happy with the position of my guideline, I'm going to release the mouse. The guideline now coming off my second anchor point is now curved as well. So let's go ahead and plot a third anchor point, clicking and dragging as I do so. Providing I continue in this manner, clicking and dragging every point, every line segment will now be curved. Now, just like we could with straight line segments, I can also constrain curved line segments. If I hold down the Shift key whilst dragging, you can see that my anchor point handles are restricted to being vertical, horizontal, or at a 45-degree angle. So let's hold down Control or Command for Mac users and click away from the shape to finish the path. Let's clear the artboard again. So how do we draw a path that contains both straight and curved line segments? I'm going to first plot two anchor points to give me a straight line. For my next anchor point, I'm going to click and drag to draw a curve segment. Remember, you can hold down the Shift key if you want to constrain the curve. Notice my last anchor point has two handles. Every curved line segment has a handle at the anchor point, so this shows me that my next line segment will also be a curve. If I want my next line segment to be a straight line, I need to remove the corresponding handle off this last anchor point. To do this, I'm going to hold down the Alt key or Option for Mac users, and I'm going to click on the anchor point. You will see that my handle disappears and my guideline now shows me that my next segment will be a straight line. So let's go ahead and plot another anchor point. Now let's repeat the process, draw a new curved line and Alt click to remove the handle. What if I change my mind and want that last anchor point to have two curved handles again? No problem, I simply click and drag on it to recreate the handle, dragging until I am happy with the length of the handle. Remember, the length of this handle determines the depth of the next curve. So I'll draw one more path segment and then I will hold down Control to finish the path. By default, when you draw curved line segments, the pair of handles that appear either side of the anchor point are equal in length. This means that the depth of the curves on either side of the anchor point will be equal. If you want to say draw a deep curve followed by a shallow curve, we need to make the pair of handles unequal in length. So let's go ahead and draw first a curve with equal handles. For the next anchor point, I'm going to click and drag until I am happy with the curve being drawn and the length of the first handle. Then I'm going to hold down my Control or Command key to make the length of the second handle much longer. This means that the third curve segment I draw will be much deeper. So let's clear the artboard again. Now let's look at how curved lines affect closed path objects. All the paths I've drawn so far, I have simply clicked to make my first anchor point. When I close the path, this first point is a corner point. I'm going to draw a shape again, but this time for my first point I'm going to click and drag to give it two anchor point handles. This also gives my first line segment a deeper curve than if I were to start with a straight point. When I close the path, my end point is curved, making a smooth shape. Now what if I start with a curve point, then change my mind and decide I need to end with a corner point instead? No problem, just hold down the Alt or Option key as you close the path and it will convert the first curve point into a corner point. When you close a path, you can also adjust the position of your closing anchor point if necessary. I'm going to redraw the shape. When I close the path, I'm going to click on the last anchor point, dragging my handles as desired, but before I release my mouse, I'm going to hold down the space bar and drag the mouse to reposition the anchor point. When I am happy, I can release the spacebar and the mouse. So far, we've been adjusting the path as we draw. There will be instances when you need to adjust existing paths. I'm going to open up a new document with some paths that we can edit. There are two ways to do this. One is with the Direct Selection tool. that we'll look at in the next topic, and the other is with the anchor point tool, which I can access under the pen tool in the tool panel. So the first thing I can do with the anchor point tool is to click and drag path segments to new positions. As I hover over a path segment, you will see that the mouse changes to indicate I can now click to drag the line. This leaves the anchor points in their original position. If I use this tool on curve segments, it just increases or decreases the depth and shape of the curve. However, if I use this tool on straight line segments, it changes them into curved lines. If I hold down the Shift key while I am dragging, it constrains the curve. I can also use the anchor point tool to convert anchor points from curves to corners and vice versa. To change a curve point to a corner point, simply drag one of the handles. This breaks the handle pairing. To repair the handles and make a smooth curved line again, hold down Alt and click on the handle you want to align. To remove a handle to make a straight line, click on the handle once without holding any keys down. Remember, you can turn the straight line back into a curve by dragging the line itself back into a curved position. Finally, if you want to move the position of an anchor point, hold down the Shift key whilst clicking on the anchor point. Once selected, you can release the Shift key. If you keep the Shift key held down whilst you are dragging, it will constrain the move to either the vertical or the horizontal axis or a 45-degree angle. When you draw paths, it is best practice to use as few anchor points as possible. This will give you a smoother result. However, there will be instances when you need to add additional anchor points that weren't part of your original path. You can do this with the Add Anchor Point tool. I'm going to go ahead and select the Add Anchor Point tool from the tool panel. To add an anchor point, click anywhere on a path. By default, a curve point is added. However, you can convert and adjust the new anchor point to whatever you need it to be using the same methods as we've just been through. To remove an anchor point, we use the Remove Anchor Point tool. This can also be found under the Pen tool in the tool panel. However, if you either have the Add or Remove Anchor Point already selected, you can hold down the Alt key to temporarily switch between the two. You can see the plus and the minus changing next to my mouse cursor to show which one is currently active. So with the Alt key held down to activate the Remove Anchor Point tool, I'm going to simply click on an anchor point to remove it. So that concludes creating and editing paths with the Pen tool. It might take you a while to get the hang of it, but practice and re-watch this tutorial as many times as you need to, and I promise that you will learn to love it. In the next lesson, we are going to look at the Direct Selection tool, which provides you with another way to edit paths and anchor points.